The most anticipated Bills season in 3 decades is here. Can Josh Allen and this offense get better in 2021? Which player is poised for the biggest breakout season? And will the Bills' year end in Los Angeles at the Super Bowl? All of that is coming up on this week's edition of the Buffalo Plus Podcast.
Welcome back to the Buffalo Plus Podcast, presented by Connors and Ferris. Mike Catalana, Dan Fates. I am Jenna Cottrell. We are getting you ready for the 2021 Bills regular season as Buffalo opening up with the Steelers on Sunday. Mike, there are so many expectations heading into this year. How do you measure where the Bills are at?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything like this since I first started covering the team 30 years ago. And I think the one it reminds me of was when they got into that, in 88 and 89, when the crowd was just crazed. Now, we would have seen that last year. Coming off that playoff year, I think it would have had that feel to it. But I think it's ramped up even more because you got the combination of this team, making the long run in the playoffs and Josh Allen ascending himself to star status and the Bills looking like a legitimate Super Bowl contender. I don't remember a season since then even remotely close to the anticipation of this one.
It's funny. We were talking about it at practice yesterday, Jen and I were, and I was talking to some of the Bills PR members and saying, trying to think of stories that, you kind of want to do as the season goes on. And we both kind of laughed and said, stories are tougher to come by now because the Bills have a superstar. The Bills have a superstar at quarterback. And that's just insane to me to think about. The fact that Josh Allen is obviously his contract of $258 million, but, really coming in with the aspirations. And I know we sound like broken records, but there's never Mike. I mean, Jim Kelly was great and revolutionized some of the offense that you see today with the K gun and things like that. But, we joked around about trying to make comparisons to NBA players and I tweeted out and a bunch of people were like, well, there's no comparison for Josh. I had said Giannis, just kind of going off of the size and the freak talent. A couple of people said Jokic, which I thought was also fair because Jokic does a lot of things really well.
Yeah, but Josh is a supreme athlete. Jokic is he's the athlete of a Y player. Yes. Yes.
But just going off that, Jenna, the fact of covering a team that has this amount of expectations with two legitimate superstars and a really young player as their middle linebacker in Tremaine Edmonds, who could, head to another, Pro Bowl. This is crazy that we talked all about this, but now we're finally here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's something that we have talked about all offseason. And I know Bills fans have been so excited for, but it is crazy to me because of those expectations being so high, but then it's the pressure that goes into that. We talked about it yesterday, Dan and I did, about how, no one saw last season coming and they were able to play loose and all those things. And I'm like, yeah, there were no expectations really on the team. People thought that they could be good, but going into the season was, what is Josh Allen's development? And Sean McDermott said it's what kept him up at night. Now this year, and we talked about it yesterday, how does this team evolve? How does this team continue to take a step forward? Because they thrive in that underdog role, Mike. They have loved it. All these guys get motivation from it. They're the favorites now. And that changes a lot.
They're going to still say that they're underdogs in certain times. It'll be kind of comical. It would be like Brady saying he's an underdog. Nobody thought I could do it. It's not quite at that level, but no, they're no longer underdogs. And you go back to last year, and last year it was more about how will the Patriots be without Brady, right? Because now the division is open. And will it be the Bills or will it be the Dolphins who make that move? Because, both those teams were sort of in that realm, and you say which one of them's going to move. And the questions about Josh Allen, he answered those questions last year. Sure, there could be some statistical regression, but I don't think Josh Allen is going back to 2018 Josh anytime soon. He could have some issues. Every quarterback does. Mahomes has had them. Brady has had them. But I think he's established himself in certainly the last year that he can be that guy. Now, that being said, this whole idea of we're not focused on the pressure and there's more pressure on the inside than there is on the outside. All that's fine. Here's the reality. They start the year 3-2. The headlines are going to be what's wrong with the Bills?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because now you're not that team anymore. You know, you're this team. You are Super Bowl, I don't want to say favorites, but they are one of the favorites, right?
Mhm.
And so it is pressure, and they will feel it. And I do not remember. Now, you guys tell me if I'm wrong. I do not remember a moment last year. Okay, I take that back. I think there was a little bit after that Tennessee, Kansas City back-to-back where there was a little step back.
Panic.
But the Tennessee game was a strange one with the
So
COVID and
weird.
the delay.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
the Tampa game or the Kansas City game got pushed back, and it was a weird game and all. But from that point on, they started winning again, and there was never that moment. It was like, oh. And it really hit me when they lost the Arizona game.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's a tough loss, weird way, but they're fine. We haven't felt that in Buffalo in 30 years where you didn't have to panic after a loss. I'll be curious to see if it does happen this year. How do they respond to real adversity during the regular season when it never really hit them last year?
Maybe they need some of it, and maybe that's a discussion for a later part of the podcast, for later in the season. Like, again, we're pontificating here. It's what Mike does best, but I've learned a lot from him. Just the fact of, what if the Bills start 4-0, but they're unimpressive in their 4-0 wins? Maybe they need a game-winning field goal from Tyler Bass to beat Houston, like kind of like ugly wins.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, you know what, I can see them acting like, we haven't played our best football yet. I'm just trying to look into that crystal ball where you kind of sit there and see, because I think Mike makes a good point. After that Arizona loss on the Hail Mary, everybody just kind of shrugged it off. They went into the bye. So like that kind of like coasted them into like forgetting about it. We never really discussed it until later. But just the fact of like, oh, well, we lost the game. We're still really good. We're still playing really well football. One play doesn't define us. And going into this season, and Jen and I talked about it again yesterday when we kind of recapped practice, there is so much pressure, but I feel like the Bills are also putting pressure on themselves in the positive way of, this roster is so talented. You don't know what next year is going to hold. You don't know what injuries are. Like Micah Hyde talked about it, that like, this is the year to do it. And he's like, I know I'm annoying some of the younger guys. He's like, I just had a baby girl. He's like, I'm getting up early. He's like, I've been up for 5 hours before I come into the facility. He's like, so I don't want to waste this. I don't want to waste my time getting up.
Oh, I can't relate to Micah with the baby, but I can relate to being older and crankier, which is what he is. And I love that. So Micah Hyde's going to be my new, like, Lorenzo, right? You know, he's the older, established guy that in the NFL world feels like he and I went to high school together, but in the real world, he could be my son. Okay, so, but I love that. I want to hear that crankiness a little bit. Like, hey, guys, it's right here. First of all, Jenna, in this conference, right now, like, go ahead and slip a little bit, and you see what happens to you.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Baltimore might be that team this year. We don't know. Like, where it's like they're right there, and then you slip a little and boom. You know, your window closes. I don't care how good. Look at Seattle in the NFC. They still have Russell Wilson, but you're like, okay, are they still one of those teams? So, Jenna, the moment is now. The window is wide open, but it can close quickly.
Yeah. And that's what we have talked about so much, is the opportunity is it's time to seize. That being said, though, it is such a long season. And I feel like I'm curious what we can expect from Josh Allen, because we saw such the breakout year last year, came in second in MVP voting. He answered a lot of questions, but how do you continue to move that goalpost back? Because he's now $258 million richer, like we had talked about. That must be, is he going to be weighed down by all that money, Mike? But seriously, like, where can we place our expectations? Because there's a lot riding on the quarterback in this league anyways. And with the Bills' hopes, it's a lot on Allen. Yeah,
it's a good point. So let's put it out there outside of the team in the locker room. It is a lot of money, right? So it's like, is he living up to that? Is he that guy? Did they sign him early? You know, and then right. That's all that stuff that can come up. Then there's, even with the fan base, like going into week 1 last year, he had never thrown for 300 yards.
I think about that. Yeah.
We expect that at halftime now. And I'm only half joking. Like, he can do that. He legitimately can do that in a game. He's that talented, right? And before it was like, oh my God, he got through this thing. It's 300 yards. So even the fan base, you ask them what they expect. Pick numbers for Josh. when the guy last year, the fan was tweeting it out, he was saying, 280 and 2 touchdowns. Well, it's 380 and 4 touchdowns now. So that is out there for him now. And whether it impacts him or not, hey, come on, they're human.
Yeah.
His expectations are higher too. So you're right. Yeah. You move that goalpost and we'll see how many times he can still get there.
That's one of the things that we were joking around about it. And obviously I did the story about him being found in Firebaugh last year. I did this kind of around, a couple months ago, 15 months ago, kind of talk about who was Josh Allen before he was in Buffalo and became pretty much the savior. Let on know it would be, he's way more of the savior now than he was, heading into this year, a year ago. And I go back to some of the conversations I had with Josh, and it was just me and him one-on-one. And I remember asking, everybody's always talked about this confidence that Josh has had. And I remember asking him point blank, kind of being a little uncomfortable, asking him, how are you so confident when nobody else thought you were any good? Like you talk about how you always knew you're going to be this good when you were a 0-star recruit. You had to go to junior college. You still only got one offer. You wanted to go to Fresno State and they didn't even want you there. Like all of these things. And I kept asking, and he goes, that's just kind of the way I was brought up. And he talks about the conversations he had with his dad and that his dad would drive him to school in the morning and he would pretend that he was interviewing him that after he'd won the Super Bowl. And so that's where some of Josh's answers, and I'm sure he listens to Buffalo Plus because everybody does, are so canned.
Yes.
And so I hate to say phony because that comes off as a condescending
cookie cutter.
Yes, they're cookie cutter answers. But there is part of him that I really do believe in when he says, my expectations are higher than anybody else's. That last year when we were all shocked, Josh kind of had this attitude, and it wasn't fake when he's like, I knew I could do this. Now some of that is BS, right, and some of that is, having to do it. But I think he's always had that level of confidence when nobody's really believed in him and nobody thought he could do it, to say, I'm going to prove you wrong in the PC way. And I'm going to shove it in your face that I know I have the talent. I need some tooling. I need Brian Daboll. I need these pieces around. I need Stephon Diggs to really get to that potential. But I look at him going into this year, I don't think he thinks there's any different because I think he's had high expectations going into every year. Now some are more realistic than others, Mike, but I just don't think that this year is so much different where people now are saying wow, Josh, you're really good. When I think in his head, he's always thought he's really good.
Okay, that's an interesting way to look at it. Well, 2 things I want to mention. One, if we had tape of Josh being interviewed by his dad, is he going cliche after cliche in his answers?
No.
No? You think he's
learned how to be cliche?
I think he would go cliche in the beginning. That's the running joke to start. Especially when he's doing that. Yeah, he's going cliche.
I owe it all to my offensive line.
Yeah, 1,000%. 1,000%.
Okay. But the second thing is, Dan, the only thing that changes, and you're right, his mindset has always been, I'm good. The difference now is everybody thinks he's good.
Yeah.
And it's sort of and guess what? You know who else does? His teammates. Mm-hmm. There is that moment on a team where they just know you're the guy. And that came last year. There was no doubt about Josh was their leader, and he was their leader, and they expect him to play like that every game. Now, you made that point. Jenna, every game didn't go great. I mean, look at the Jets game when they're kicking field goals, right? There were moments, or the Baltimore game in the playoffs. Right. So he did come back from that. But Dan, you make a good point. I do believe he's had that confidence. He's needed it. It's funny now, because now everybody's on board with Josh Allen. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe except Nick Wright, but everybody's on board with Josh Allen. So we'll see. We'll see how he responds.
And I think it was 2018 or 2019. I can't remember. I think it was 2019 when he started to finally get play better. And I remember he had the 2 wins back to back in New York. They won at the Jets, and then they won against the Giants.
That was.
And I remember. Yeah, and I remember Jerry Hughes talking about it, where he said how his mindset had changed defensively, where he said that there had always been a time when it got to be 3rd down. And Jerry's like, it would always be 3rd down. And it was grab your helmet, guys. We're going back out there. And he goes, then it got to the point when Josh would start, And now it was more hero ball then. It was more chaotic. It was more the backyard football. But he was like, hang on, guys. Like, don't grab your helmets yet. Like, this kid could make a play on third down. Like this could happen. And he did. And I think that's where that started to turn into it. And I think that grew in 2020. And I think obviously now with where we are in 2021. But yeah, I think where I'm so much where people are like, oh, everybody's got confidence. Yeah. Every NFL athlete has confidence. Every pro athlete has confidence. Some are more real than others. And I think that's a big difference, is that some people will say, like, I'm a confident guy. You don't really mean it. Josh, I believe it when he says that he's a really confident guy.
I also believe there's the factor, too, of being competitive. And I think Josh is a very, very, I mean, every professional athlete is competitive, but I think Josh has been so motivated by his past. Like, it's when everyone tells you no. Speaking and from experience, when people tell you no and that you're crazy for having an idea or a belief, maybe like in this YouTube channel, and
Dable's helped that.
Well, yeah, and also I think I've heard a phrase or a quote that I've heard Josh say of like, "You bloom where you're planted," and he's firmly been planted in Buffalo. Like, I mean, the fact that he has, the core around him, and having Brian Dable back is for another year is honestly shocking, considering the way last offseason went, what we were expecting from him. But I think he's been firmly planted in Western New York.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point you make about the competitiveness. We're talking about his confidence. I think the competitiveness is something maybe that we forget about, because there are a lot of guys, you can go back to college quarterbacks that have won all the time. They just have the best players around them. They go to Ohio State, they win. They go to Alabama, they win. And that's all they've known. And Josh has kind of had to scratch and claw for everything, much like Brian Dable. And I always remember that story that Josh said when he really started to open up more about Brian Dable, even last year. And he was like, Dable was so competitive that he used to dip all the time and chew tobacco. And somebody's like, you can't quit. And he's like, okay, I'll quit. Like, you don't think I can do it? Like, I'll do whatever you say I can't do. And I think that was part of it with Josh, and that Dable has poured so much into him. And again, Jen, going to your point of you blossom where you're planted, like
you bloom where you're planted.
Yeah. Like that goes with it too, because these guys have both of their stocks have risen exponentially in the last 2 years because of one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true. It is so true.
So we asked in the beginning about, can they get better, the whole offense? And as great as Josh is, even if he's the same, I think the question for me this year would be, who's picking it up? Obviously, last year, I mean, it was Diggs. Diggs helped him go from a good quarterback to a great one. It's obviously a lot on Josh, but man, the connection between those two really from the get-go was incredible. And look, Diggs may not catch as many balls for as many yards. We don't know. He put up a spectacular year, first ever All-Pro from the Bills. But then the question is, who is doing that for them offensively, and in what ways? And I honestly believe the passing game is going to be just as lethal as it was. Maybe some different numbers. But Dan, I'm not saying this just to get you going, but I think what can make them a better offense and a place to become more consistent, where they don't have those lulls like they did in Baltimore, like they did in Kansas City game with the two playoff games, is if, as Dable said, we can run the ball more effectively. And it's not about being a running team. They were bad at running the football. Zach Moss and Devin Singletary are talented enough, and there's enough concentration on what Josh and the passing game are doing. They should be able to run the ball better than they have when they decide to hand it off. And they didn't do that. And if they do that, if that element goes up 15, 20%, go ahead and stop them, because I don't see anybody stopping them.
I agree. You have to be two-dimensional.
Look, he doesn't want to say it. Go ahead.
Do we have to talk about running the football? We just had such a good discussion on Josh. I was like, I'm thinking to myself, like, this is like the best pod on Josh.
So go to the Baltimore game in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right? Josh had a bad game. And
they didn't have anything to help them break out of it.
Correct.
And Tampa does it. Tampa will run the ball. Of course they're a passing team. Kansas City came in and said, Go ahead, fellas. You want to play us in this kind of defense? We'll give Mahomes the week off, and we will run it down your throat. They don't need to do that every week. Sometimes you need to do it for 2 series. And all of a sudden, the team is like, how do we stop this team? We had no shot to stop them.
Yeah.
Or if somebody's out. That, to me, is where this offense can evolve to be unstoppable.
I agree. It's not running the ball more, it's running the ball better.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
No comment.
No further questions at this time.
Next question.
Okay. Well, let's move on then, because we got to talk to the coordinators on Wednesday just about who they thought was expected to have a breakout season. We always love that. Brian Dable said all of his players, which is a classic Brian Dable answer. But Leslie Frazier said Ed Oliver. And I thought that Bills fans would be very interested in that, just considering he was obviously a pick they invested a lot in, 9th overall. He's entering his 3rd year. He's got to have a big year this year, Mike.
Yeah, he's in that year, and we saw different way, but we saw Josh Allen blossom. We saw Trey White blossom. I mean, these guys that, second year, you don't look like a rookie. Pro. You're a good player. And that 3rd year, and last year was a strange one. The interior, Harrison Phillips hurt, and Starr opting out. It was different. Well, they got a lot of help around him now. They've got young guys and older guys on the outside. He's got help on the inside. He's got guys that can play either spot. Get after it is what I want to see. Yes, I think that would be a huge thing for them if Ed Oliver goes to become the guy we saw in Dallas on Thanksgiving, where he's disruptive, right? Disruptive. That's what I want to see. And Dan, it may not come out in stats. It's not like I expect him to have 10 sacks, but I want to see him just be where they're like, what are we doing with this guy?
Impactful.
Who's the guy? Impactful, yes.
Agree.
How funny would it be? I mean, is it lame to say that Tremaine Edmonds could have a breakout year? Yeah,
I'm with you. That's the guy I was going to say.
Wait. He seems different this year.
He seems younger. Like, is that possible?
That's not what. No.
So we can call him Benjamin Button, the linebacker. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
No.
He now, and like I said, he's been asked about it. It's been well documented. We was asked a lot about yesterday, especially with Leslie Frazier, is the splash plays. It's the forced fumbles. It's the fumbles. It's the interceptions. Tremaine Edmonds gets his hands on the ball twice a game and has nothing to show for it at the end besides a pass breakup. If he can turn into this guy that can cover, tight ends when he needs to be, if he can get a guy that, he's 6'5", he runs like a gazelle, like sack the quarterback a few more times. Like, those splash plays could take him to all pro levels, where we looked and we said, Trey White's really good. Trey White is a really good all pro corner. But to make the next play, you have to alter games, even when you're not like you have to make plays that alter games.
Yeah.
And he hasn't had enough of those. We've asked him, how do you do that? And it's practice, it's focus, all of those things. It comes down to making a play, Jenna.
No, I completely agree. But I feel like I've at least noticed a difference in the way he carries himself heading into the season. And I know that might sound that he seems more comfortable.
Yeah.
And look, he's entering his 4th year in the league. He's entering his 4th year in this defense. Like, all of those things.
He's still 16 years old. It's unbelievable.
He just got his license.
Yeah.
Can't drink yet. No, but I will say that to me means something, because you can feel being comfortable, I think, is both a blessing and a curse in some instances. But I think he's struggled to trust his instincts because he's been uncomfortable. And I feel like because now he's had the time on task and all of those things, I expect him to play better because he still has all those physical attributes. And he also has the experience now to go with it. Yeah. So this, again, if this is going to be the year, I think it's got to be this year. But I think we see a difference in the way he carries himself and even is able to articulate the way he feels. And that to me may not seem like a difference that would show on the field, but I think that reflects how he feels both on and off of it.
So Dan was referencing, getting accolades for Tremaine, and he's made the Pro Bowl team. I think he was an alternate, and he got in 2 years ago, and then he made it. And when we were doing this very podcast last year, I said he became a Pro Bowl player and this year he'll earn it. And I didn't think he did. And I like the kid. And I can say kid. He's really a kid. But I
13.
like him. And I think he is the kind of guy you want on your team, right? But we're talking about high first, mid first round pick here. We're talking about a guy with big expectations. Now we're talking about year 4. They pick up the 5th year option, which I get all that. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. But he's still got to prove something because that next contract for him could be huge, right? In terms of, and I don't know what motivates him. He doesn't really let us in on all that kind of stuff. I think he's happy. Here, okay, I'll make my NBA comparison to Tremaine Edmonds.
Okay.
It's Ben Simmons.
Oh,
wow.
That's insulting.
No. Ben Simmons is a 2-time All-Star and all defensive, maybe should have won all defensive player of the year. Right. What are we saying? What are we saying about Tremaine? He can't make plays in that defense. You are finding the flaw that is still there. Immensely talented. Ooh. What he does extremely well, but there's a flaw in his game. Now, again, more's asked of an NBA player. There's only 5 guys on the court. It's a little different. Yeah. But the physical attributes, and then the idea of how much different is he as a player as we get into year 4 and year 5. And that's been Simmons failing to not improve in those areas. No matter how good he is at the other stuff, it's highlighted. For the Bills, that decision will be not that he isn't a good player and you want him on the team, but are we going to give him $38 million guaranteed or whatever the contract would be? Or is that the moment when you move on from
Hey, Jenna, that was a mic drop.
That was a mic drop. Yeah, that was a mic
I may
drop.
break that one out on the show tonight.
Yeah, I think you should. Yeah. I like it.
Yes.
Okay, well, I to play devil's advocate too, you can look at the Bills and we never expected for them to re-sign Matt Milano. Yeah. We never, you always said, Mike, you usually pay one guy.
At those positions, yeah. They've mapped it out with Poyer and Hyde, but neither one of those guys had broken the bank.
Yes.
And they're not the rookie coming off a rookie deal with a big payday coming in that second contract. So yes, they've been able to sort of get through that. But yeah, it'll be. Hey, look, I'd love to see him break out, make all kinds of plays, get older, all those things.
Get his driver's license, be able to rent a car.
That's it.
All of those things.
Be great.
It'd be great for him.
Yeah.
Okay, on the offensive side of the ball, I feel like I'm going to be saying this all season long.
Don't do it.
I love Gabriel Davis's game.
Yeah.
I really do. I just think that he has been a under the radar piece for this offense. You talk about Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley, obviously Emmanuel Sanders, another veteran they added this offseason. Last year it was John Brown, all those people. But I just think I've been so impressed, and Gabriel Davis is only entering his 2nd season. I just think
and he's 10 years older than Tremaine Edmonds.
I'm just looking forward to see how much his role increases this year and how he deals with that. Because like you said, Mike, Stephon Diggs' season last year was outstanding. I feel like that with that comes a lot of defenses with double coverage and different teams and trying to figure out how to scheme better to cover Diggs. Yeah. So that inherently would probably leave Gabriel Davis a little bit more open.
Can I play devil's advocate?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
If they were so in love with Gabriel Davis as much as you were, Jenna, they don't sign Emmanuel Sanders.
No, I don't think that.
I think that they are fine with Gabe being a fill-in guy and not a focal player. I think they like him to fit roles. I don't know if they're ready for him to take center stage as a 2 wide receiver. I think that's my thought.
I think you can get a guy like Emmanuel Sanders who wants to come to Buffalo and has that experience. I agree where I don't expect Davis to become the number 2 guy. I just think he has the ability to be very consistent.
Yeah.
And I think we saw that in the playoffs. Some of the catches he had in the playoffs, especially in that Colts game, changed the game. And because of that, I'm I want to see what this kid can do with another year.
All right. I'll take a little different tact on the whole Emmanuel Sanders thing. I think they saw regression and injury to John Brown,
Mhm.
and they found a guy who's 34 years old, who's won the Super Bowl and been in Super Bowls before in Sanders, and thought he can fit not only in that role, but also in a slot role. And I think you're going to see him play that. And maybe he and Beasley on the field at the same time, both in the slot. But
That's true.
regardless of
Flexibility.
that, I'm still I'm with you on Davis, and I think he does become. Look, Sanders is 34.
Yeah.
They love Davis. I think he can take his game another level. That's what he did as a rookie.
Mhm.
And, I think he can play opposite Diggs. And I think the fact that he can move all over the field is a plus. It doesn't.
I agree.
Some guys have
He's
versatility.
not limited. Yeah.
Well, some guys have versatility because they can't do anything particularly well.
Mhm.
I think he can do a lot of those things well.
Oh, Dan does not agree.
No, I completely agree with Mike with what he said. He does a lot of things good.
Chairs squeak.
He doesn't do one single thing great. And I think
I
that
don't
he
know.
can. I think he can develop into that. I'm not saying that he's not ready. I'm not saying that he won't be into the player that could be a number one or number two. I just think that they didn't have to go out and spend $6 million on a 34-year-old wide receiver that's had injury issues. They wanted to because I think they needed to replace something. And if they thought they could replace something, if they thought they could replace John Brown with Gabe Davis, they would have. They didn't. They replaced him with Emmanuel Sanders.
Yeah, I don't agree. I think Sanders was available, and they went that route. If Sanders wasn't available and they didn't have that kind of player that they could have grabbed, I think they would have moved. And I think they would have moved Gabe Davis maybe up and then signed another player, maybe more of a mid-range guy. They got him. It's relatively
Maybe they
cheap.
would have then gotten like a Zach Ertz or somebody that they were supposed to get.
Yeah, and now you watch. There's even talk in Philly now they're going to trade Goddard and sign Blonde Ertz to an extension.
Oh,
so
wow.
you never know. Yeah, I mean, I guess he looks great. I mean, it's not like he's 50. For God's sakes, he's 30. But
Yeah.
But that gets to my other guy, and I know we got to, we're going here, but
We are.
I want to be on board with Dawson Knox, not to become a star, but to become a more consistent player. That would be a big deal for this team on their offense.
Dan is not buying any of this.
I didn't say he was going to. I'm saying is they could use that. Think about it. In terms of starters, he's the most questionable guy as a starter next to, I would say, Levi. But Levi is who he is. They know
Levi's
who he
produced.
is. And they expect Levi to be that guy. They expect Dawson Knox to be better. They see his physical ability and they expect him to be better. So how about we just get him to the point where he's more consistent in his job? Because they're going to play the second tight end a lot of times is going to be Reggie Gillum, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because do you think the reflection of the roster breakdown, because it's Dawson Knox, Tommy Sweeney, and then Reggie Gilliam, who is a flex guy.
Right.
So do you think that is a vote of confidence for Knox and Sweeney, or do you think that's more just the fact that they would want their numbers to be in other places?
I think it's both, and I would say it's the confidence in Knox, not necessarily Sweeney. Not that they don't have confidence in him as the position he is, but if they're not dressed, to be my guess, we'll see Sunday. I don't think Sweeney is on the active roster for the game. Okay. I think he's inactive. That would be my guess. And Reggie and Knox would be the two tight ends playing in the game. Okay. That would be my guess.
That's fair.
Yeah.
What about Devin Singletary? Any running back we think have a breakout season? I mean, I know Dan doesn't think that, but Devin Singletary looked pretty good in the preseason.
Well, the way a guy
beat that's what we talk about is preseason for number one.
But
running back.
Oh my God. God, you're relentless today.
My kid was up in the middle of the night. I'm all fired up.
He's Micah Hyde.
I'm a cranky old man today.
No, the way a guy, again, what did I say? It's what you expect. Like Knox can elevate by being more consistent. Singletary can elevate by becoming the number one back in whatever they use him. Because he really, it was shared a lot. Hey, believe me, if he shows that, he's going to play more than Moss. But the truth is, if Moss shows more of that, he's going to play more than Singletary. So he's got his work cut out for him.
Will we be in LA in February? What do you think?
Well, that gets to our game and season predictions, right?
Yeah.
Okay, who's starting off? Well, we want to pick the game. Want to pick the game first?
Why not?
All right. Bills
Okay.
are 6.5-point favorites against the Steelers at home.
All right.
Mhm.
I've got Bills winning it 34-20. I think they're in control. I don't think the Steelers are a particularly exceptional team. I think they have talent. I think they have a lot of things they need to get figured out on the field. They could be the kind of team last year where they slowly got a little worse. This year, I think they could slowly get better if that offensive line can develop, but I don't see it there yet. I think the Bills control the game and they win 34-20.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike. I think the offense gets off to a little bit of a slower start. I think the Steelers defense is still pretty good. You heard Brian Dable talk about it. They've still been in the top 5 of most defensive categories over the last decade, including the last 2 seasons. 27-17, I still think the Bills win and cover. I think their Bills defense plays better, and the offense maybe leaves us wanting a little bit more, which I think we may see early on in the season, waiting for this offense to really explode as, teams have made adjustments to what the Bills did during the offseason and last year. But I still think the Bills are in control this entire game, 27-17.
All right. I'm going 34-27, but I think it's not as close as the final score indicates. I think there's some who cares touchdowns later on from the Steelers.
We're all covering.
Yeah.
Sorry. Someone's trying to get into the door here. Never mind. I think we see Josh Allen and the Bills offense kind of take a little bit to settle in, but then they do. And then I think, like you said, I think the Steelers have, they have Ben Roethlisberger back, obviously, but there are a lot of new personnel on that team, new offensive coordinator. It's going to take them some time to work out some of the issues that they have.
Yeah.
Because of that, I have the Bills winning.
All right. So now we're talking about LA?
Now we're talking about LA.
They're going to LA this year.
Wow.
I'm gonna hold off on my, how that game goes when they play against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. But they're going to LA. This team's going.
You got a season win total? You got a record?
I have them. I was back and forth, and honestly, I have them at 12-5.
That's what
I was going to go 13-4, but I'm going to say 12-5. But maybe even the end of the year. I don't know how the end of the year is going to go. I think it's still going to be a great season. All those things. Mm-hmm. I think they'll be playoff ready, and I've got them at 12-5 for this year.
I was the worst at picking games last season. I was the worst. Jenna was first. I was last.
No. I was first last year.
No, you weren't.
Yes, I was.
No, you weren't.
I only got one game wrong all season.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Was that?
Yeah.
I think it was the year before, Jenna.
Yes, it was going back the year before.
No, someone fact checked that. Someone fact checked.
But I was the one.
He's an old man. He can't remember.
For all the people that comment in and say that Dan's the negative one on all of our Thursday shows, I was the only one last year that had them at 13-3, and they went 13-3. I will say that. That's the only thing I can tip my cap for. This year, I will say they will be 13-4, and yes, they will go to the Super Bowl. I was with Mike, 12-5, 13-4. I'll get in the 13th win. And again, this is weird because they're going to play 17 games, so that's mentally how to add up to 17 when I can barely do math to begin with. But yeah,
same. All right, I actually did not know Mike was picking 12-5, but I agree with that.
Hey, look, that's it's that range. Honestly, with 17 games, there's that extra game. It depends on which side of the ledger you want to put it on. That's where we're
too. And at the end of the season, are they going to be resting people, or is it going to be the last 2 games they're resting people? Is it going to be the last game? You know what I mean? There's a lot that kind of plays into that. I also have them going to the Super Bowl.
Look at that.
Superb owl.
Yeah, I think I'm going to hold off. Again, we can say we don't know who. We don't know if they'd go. We don't know if. But I think
Mitch.
No, they're going.
Who knows?
We're going.
Yes, LA bound. Yeah, isn't that something? Before it was like, can you pick them for a winning record? Now we're all picking them to go to LA for the Super Bowl. I think we all want to go on the trip too. So
also
that's part of
what
it.
About
that
AFC
has nothing
Championship
to do with
in Buffalo.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the divisions match up.
Yeah.
Root for a team like the Chargers to pressure Kansas City. I mean, that's what you need. if it comes down to that, because obviously it's a pretty big difference if you can play that one in Orchard Park.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. We're going to wrap up here. We'll have post-game coverage, obviously. We have a lot of content on Buffalo Plus, so be sure to
including, Dan, give everybody a little tease on your story.
Oh, yeah.
Talked to Trey White, sat down with Trey. I tracked down some of his high school highlights from his senior year at Green Oaks High School in Shreveport, Louisiana. And Trey White was, as he says, pretty good QB and mildly impressive. You get to see Trey White as a 16-year-old or 17-year-old. He's adorable. He's as cute as a button. And he was, and even he, in his words, how could you not love that face? And then you get Jordan Poyer's reaction. I pretty much sat down with him like The Last Dance with like Michael Jordan and just showed him some videos. And pretty much him being a quarterback was able to put him on the map to end up in Buffalo to shut down quarterbacks. So big circle, all comes full circle, but really cool. Obviously, anytime you can sit down and talk to Trey White, you take that chance.
Yeah, it's a great story. Be sure to check it out. And be sure to subscribe for all that unique content that we do have, because it's not just what's been said in press conferences. It's the stories that go along with it. So, all right, we will be there on Sunday, bright and early.
Yep.
All right, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. For Dan and Mike, I am Jenna. We will catch you next time on the Buffalo Plus channel. And thank you to Connors and Ferris for sponsoring us. We really appreciate it. They've done a great job helping us out. So thank you to them. Thank you to you all. And we will see you next time.